The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome to Gate City Chronicles. I'm Kevin Avard, your host. And today we are going to be talking a little bit about the law. And to join me on today's show is Mr. Mark Osborne, a defense attorney, and he's with Shepard and Osborne.
Yes, that's right.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
All right. So you're an attorney.
Yes.
All right. And you're a defense attorney.
That's correct. I do criminal defense.
Okay. And we were just talking a little bit off camera that you have a gamut of things that come before you in one day.
Yes.
What kind of defenses do you run across on a typical day?
Oh, we do quite a bit. For example, the morning can start off with you go to court and you deal with a whole bunch of different cases, and then when you come back for your afternoon appointments, it can range everything from my kid was caught drinking in the park to a driving while intoxicated case to allegations of sexual assault. We've had a couple of murder suspects come in. I mean, all of the above.
Wow.
Yes.
That's quite a load. And you, when somebody comes to an attorney, what are some of the things that they should begin to, hey, I'm in trouble, or at least I think I'm in trouble. What would you want them to be prepared with when they come to you?
That's a really good question. The first thing that I want someone to do is to be on time. Let's just start there. Be on time, because the questions I'm going to have for them may take 20 minutes, or it might take 2 hours, depending upon how important the case is. The other thing I want them to do is I want them to come to my office with any paperwork that they received either after they got a citation or after they were arrested. That meeting, after it's done, I should be the most informed person about their case as they are.
So don't come there unprepared. Come, hey, look, I got a problem. Do I need to come back? I mean, you're already on the clock at that point.
Well, that's exactly right. And whether someone hires us or not, I mean, it's nice when they do, don't get me wrong. But even if they're like, well, I didn't really want to go with that particular lawyer, as a professional, I want them to leave with knowing as much about their rights, as much about the law as I can teach them in the time that I have with them. And that's what I shoot for. I can't do that if I don't know the whole story.
Right. And it's funny, my wife and I will either watch Intervention at night as we're going to sleep, or there'll be 48 Hours, or some type of program that shows that somebody either was wrongfully accused, spent 20 years in prison, they're going over their case over and over and over again, and finally this new piece of evidence comes out. But invariably, it usually starts off where they're locked in this room, and they're being interrogated by the authorities. And they're just, they're being worn down, 7 hours, a drink of water, not even a bathroom break.
Yep.
And they make statements without any type of representation, not realizing that in that very initial interview, they'll call it an interview. Number one, they don't know they can leave unless they're charged, or that every word that they can and do say can be used against you.
And it will be. I mean, not only everything you say, but everything that you don't say, every move that you make, if you fidget, if you look away from the investigating officer, everything you do or say or don't do can be used against you. And you will find it in a police report. He wiped his brow when I asked him why he was going so fast. I asked, are there any drugs or weapons or severed heads in the car? And he adjusted his tie. Everything that conceivably could be argued to indicate you're guilty will be used against you. Now, as human beings, we're not robots. we can't control how often we blink or if we sweat. But you know what you can do? You can control these things right here.
Right.
And I tell people, there are going to be times, in some cases, where the best thing you can do is to have a conversation with a police officer after you hire a lawyer, right? Don't go it alone. Look what happened to Tonto when he left the Lone Ranger back at the ranch. He went to town, nothing good ever happened. Nothing good ever happened to Tonto. Okay. There's going to be times where you're just not going to. That's right, There's going to be times when it's just not wise for you to speak to an investigator, and the best time for the story to be heard by the public is when you testify in court. So people have the right to remain silent for a very good reason. Our founding fathers weren't idiots, They understood that sometimes what you say, it might be the truth, it may not be the whole truth. There may be other circumstances that one would need to know to put into proper context what you're saying. So I just tell people, look, you're not being sneaky, you're not being a mob boss. If you're being quiet, that's fine. There may be a time to talk, but get a lawyer, and then you all can reach that decision together. It should be an informed decision, right? Because what you say is going to have consequences. There's a lot of things you wouldn't do without a doctor, right? You wouldn't just perform surgery on yourself.
Right.
You wouldn't go to an insurance company and just sign your life away without speaking with someone.
Take this medication upon the approval of
right.
Some people will say, well, I've got nothing to hide.
I have represented many people. I've represented a lot of guilty people. I've represented a lot of innocent people. And let me tell you, 9 out of 10 times, they still get charged. When they talk to the police officer, all right? They still get charged. And if they don't have something to hide, then that's fine. When you go to trial, you and your lawyer can talk, and you guys will reach a decision as to whether or not it's a good idea for you to testify. There's plenty of innocent people out there who have had their words twisted. There's plenty of people out there who have just said things that they shouldn't have that made them look guilty when they weren't.
Right. So when you're in the custody of a police officer or you're in a court hearing, that's not necessarily, especially if you're not used to that.
Right.
That can be a very uncomfortable situation, and your whole body chemistry, everything about you could be totally flipped upside down because this is larger than life, and all these things can be rushing through your head.
Absolutely.
And it could dull the senses so that you can't really think properly, and you could be overwhelmed.
That's exactly right. Testifying in court is not a natural conversation. It's not. I've been an attorney for about 12 years. I've had to testify in court one time as a witness. And I got to tell you, it was stressful. And despite all the public speaking I do, despite all the trials I've done, it was nerve-wracking for me. And all the advice I give my clients, I'm sure went right out the window when I got on the stand. Don't repeat yourself. Don't let the questions make you angry. Don't be sarcastic. Testifying in court is not natural. And if people think that they're just going to do it, on their own or without any assistance, or at least without some kind of a preview as to how that's supposed to go down, they're in for a surprise.
Supposing you're subpoenaed to be a witness in a case.
Okay.
Do you need an attorney for that?
You should have an attorney.
Really?
Yeah. Now, at the very least, what you should do is go talk to a lawyer, all right, and say, look, I've been subpoenaed, and let that lawyer know why you've been subpoenaed. It may be that you're just being called to say, when I saw the car accident, the light was red. Okay? There might be other circumstances where the police or the prosecutor thinks that you may have had something to do with the case. So as someone, as a citizen of the United States, or just anybody living in the United States, you've got the right to not testify against yourself. All right? And if police or prosecutors think you might have done something wrong, you're going to want to make sure you talk to that lawyer. Because if you get up on the stand and you incriminate yourself, or you say something that could even conceivably get you charged with a crime, you're going to want to know that before you get up on the stand and swear to tell the truth. Because once you get up on the stand, you need to be truthful. You don't get to lie. You don't get to perjure yourself. Even if you think there's a good reason for it, you don't get to do it. And if you're halfway through a trial and you're halfway through your testimony, and then you get a question you don't like or could incriminate you, at that point it's too late to stop. So always talk to a lawyer before you ever testify in court, before you ever go to the police department. Stop and talk to an attorney if people are wanting to interview you or talk to you.
Okay, well, again, I'm going to bring my wife up again.
Sure.
We watch Family Feud periodically.
Okay.
And it says, name a profession that has quacks. Okay. Well, those the doctors.
Yeah.
And the lawyers inevitably came up. And
Sure.
so my question here is,
Yes.
how can somebody who is basically traumatized by a situation, wrongly accused, or maybe you did something wrong, but now you got to go shopping,
Yes.
and you don't want that quack. How do you
Right.
determine who's a good attorney, who's actually going to represent you,
Sure.
or who's, oh man, he needs to pay his mortgage, and you're the right person for that?
Right.
How do you figure that out?
It's a really good question. And I know probably hundreds of lawyers. And if I were charged with a crime, I could probably narrow that list down to 10 or 15 people who I would hire. Okay.
That's scary
Well,
for the populace.
it
You
can
knowing
be.
that the industry,
Right.
that means out of 100, and you've narrowed it down to a very short few.
Yes.
You've got a good chance of missing the mark.
You do. You absolutely do. With any profession. So my advice would be this, okay? Just remember what your mother taught you. And what I mean by that is this. First of all, when you call the law office, is the lawyer willing to get on the phone and say, hi, my name is so-and-so, what's the issue? As soon as you say hello to them, do they say, hang on, let me start the calculator and start punching in what I'm going to charge you per hour? Go to the office. Don't you dare hire a lawyer over the internet. Don't you dare hire a lawyer because he sounded nice on the phone. Go to his or her office. Make sure he or she actually has an office. Okay, make sure it's tied down and all the rest. Walk in. I've had some people say, I went to go talk to an attorney. He was in shorts and he wasn't wearing any shoes. Well, if he's not taking him or herself seriously, he's probably not going to take you very seriously. Right. Are they polite? Do they ask questions? Are they looking at you or are they looking at the clock? Okay. All these, it sounds like common sense, right? But you would be surprised the number of people who come to me because they're like, you know what, my lawyer just didn't care about what I had to say. He was rushing me through. He didn't ask me any questions. He couldn't remember my name. He made promises that seemed unrealistic to me. I mean, if you crash into a police cruiser and he says, oh yeah, that's not a big deal, you might want to measure that credibility and go somewhere else. You've got to be comfortable, all right? Because it could be the rest of your life is in that person's hands. It could be that the next several months or years or your insurance rates, your property, your freedom, your treasure, all that is going to be in the person's hands. So you go to the office, talk with them, and you just have to decide if you're going to be comfortable with them or not. But look for all the things that you would expect of a professional.
We periodically you hear people say, well, my attorney asked for an extension, another extension, and inevitably there's, well, I don't know what's going on.
Right.
Is that when you cut bait? When do you cut bait? Because it seems as though some people feel like they're being strung along,
right.
Or there's some kind of a backdoor deal going
Sure.
on. How does an individual know when that's in their best interest, or do they?
Well, I would say that there's a few things to consider. All right. In New Hampshire, we're not out in Hollywood, California. All right. And so the chance of a criminal defense lawyer having that multi-million-dollar O.J. Simpson client is very slim. All right. Most of us aren't going to have that, which means that criminal law is a volume business. No criminal defense lawyer is going to be able to make a living with 2, 3, or 4, or 10, or even just 20 clients. Okay. And so as lawyers, we have to measure and gauge properly what our workload can be. All right. So you're going to have lawyers who have other court cases. I mean, there's only 365 days in a year. I don't know very many good lawyers who only have one case a day. I don't know that, right? So again, it's going to be what's the relationship like, all right? If the lawyer is continuing cases and not letting you know about that, and you're showing up or you don't know what's going on with your case, then maybe it's time to fish or cut bait. But I also want to put the onus on the client. All right, and I tell clients this sometimes. I'm very, very honest with my clients. I say, listen, I'm going to do the best I can. But at the end of the day, this is your case. If for some reason you're not able to get a hold of me, but you think you might have court tomorrow, well, then you better call the court and just make sure, when in doubt. Because if I don't show up to court, I'm going to get yelled at by the judge and by the client. Client, if you don't show up, you're going to be taken off in cuffs when they find you. So yes, attorneys definitely have an obligation to make sure their clients know what's going on. At my office, we have an open door policy. I tell my clients, look, if you see a little Ford Focus out in the driveway, that means I'm there. If you want to come in, come on in. I give the people my cell phone. My law partner does the same thing. I do texting. I do emailing. So, if
Communication is key.
it's absolutely key. And, if people will call you. People will call you in the middle of the night. People will call you on the weekends. And that's fine. I always tell people, I'd rather know what's going on in your life right now, because it's probably easier for me to deal with that problem on a Friday night than it is a Monday morning after you make bail. So again, it goes back to comfort. It goes back to mutual respect. You can't show up at your lawyer's office and say, hey, I just got rearrested again. I got court tomorrow. What are we going to do about it? So everyone needs to have notice. Everyone needs to be on the same page. But when in doubt, show up.
Right.
Barge into the office if you have to. When in doubt, call. And if it's a holiday or the lawyer's on vacation and you're not sure what's going on, call the court. We spend lots of money on taxes. The courts have lots of staff. It's their job to answer that phone and make sure you know what's going on, and they'll be happy to do that too.
So how did you get involved with becoming a defense attorney? What made you want to become a lawyer?
Sure. Well, I started off as a prosecutor. I always wanted to be a lawyer. When I was a little kid, I got dropped off to get a haircut, and the haircut place wasn't open, so I just roamed around downtown Plymouth, Mass. Until I found a building that was open. It was a courthouse. I walked in. There was very little security. We didn't have the buzzers and the things. I just walked into court and I watched a trial. And I don't even remember what the trial was, but I know that it looked like a lot of fun. And I said, wow, I'd like to do that, because I knew I couldn't fix anything, and I wasn't very good with numbers. And my dad was a big math guy, and I knew I didn't want any part of that. And so I said, I like to talk to people for a living. And that stayed with me. It stayed with me all through junior high. It stayed with me into college and school. And I always knew that I wanted to help people, but I wanted to do it in a way that involved communication and in a way that involved research. And I liked the idea of justice. Yeah. I liked the idea of the right result happening when people went to court. So I became a prosecutor. I did that for about 4, maybe 4.5 years. I did everything from driving while intoxicated cases. I did a lot of assault on children cases, armed robberies, you name it. And I liked it. I liked it a lot. I liked being a prosecutor. But there was a time where I said to the person who's now my law partner, I said, number one, I've always wanted to have my own business. I've always wanted to see what it would be like to be an entrepreneur, even in a smaller fashion. And I also, I think I have a heart for the Constitution. I think every lawyer does, but again, the right to remain silent, the right to be free from unfair searches and seizures. That's something that's sacred to me, And when you're a prosecutor, sometimes you see that not always being honored. Sometimes you end up with prosecutors who say, well, I don't really care how the evidence was found. I'll just make a good deal and the case goes away. My attitude was, listen, if you got 10 pounds of coke off the street, I'm happy for you. But don't ask me to prosecute this guy, because the way you found it was illegal, and that's not proper. And I'm not going to justify that to a judge. And you have a number of those discussions throughout a year. You start to realize that maybe your time as a prosecutor is going to be limited, either by choice or not. And I just thought, being true to myself, I thought it was time to hang a shingle, get to work with my best friend, Justin. And that was 8 years ago. We had our 8th anniversary. I think it was June 8th of this summer. And we've never looked back.
I'm going to be having a conversation with a former senator, state senator, and we're going to be actually talking about the death penalty.
Okay, sure.
And I've always been a pro-death penalty individual in that I think that it's within our history. It was used sometimes properly, sometimes improperly. Right. But as time goes on, and again, these TV shows, where it shows that there are rogue prosecutors. There's always that one bad apple.
Oh, yes.
and that said, that the evidence, there was exculpatory evidence that wasn't
Yes.
brought forward, and then there's evidence that was either tainted, and we have this issue with this lady who tainted a lot of these DNA samples, thousands of them, thousands.
Yep.
And people are in prison, maybe wrongfully, because of the tampered evidence. And possibly, instead of justice being served, maybe a notch on somebody's belt or a career move, got somebody on death row. That's very possible, and it's really causing me to pause, because justice, in my mind, really is about. It's not necessarily about rehabilitating somebody. It's about justice. It's about giving a due punishment for if something was done. All the exculpatory evidence that could be available was brought forward, and all the criminal charges brought forward, and you weigh that. Trial by your jury, the whole 9 yards. But it seems as though if there's a prosecutor that is not ethical, somebody's life is in the balance of that.
Well, the death penalty is a penalty if it's carried out. There is no appeal, is there?
Correct. Well, all the way up to it.
Right, all the way up to it. But I mean, once the needle goes in, or once the rope goes around the neck, or whatever we do here in New Hampshire, once that consequence is carried out, you better hope that guy or girl was guilty.
Right.
And you know what? I wrestle with the same thing. I'll be dead honest with you. I wrestle with the same thing about the death penalty. In principle, I understand it. I do believe in punishments and people being accountable. I believe in deterrence and all that. Okay, I really do. And that's not even taking into consideration what if that's a member of your family or someone you care about. I get that.
We had that situation up in Milford where the mom and daughters were I think butchered, and just out of the love of evil.
Yes.
You have somebody that'll go in and shoot up a whole bunch of people just because there's their love of evil.
Right. Yep.
And those are some of these blatant cases I can understand it, but when it's what's the evidence?
Circumstantial.
Circumstantial. Holy cow!
Well, it's frightening, because I'll tell you, and this is why I wrestle with it, okay? And I am one of those people who do believe that most people in law enforcement are good people, and I believe that most of them are honest. I believe most people who serve in any kind of government capacity are good, fair, and just people who want to better their community. Having said that, when I was prosecuting, I saw a case that I had prosecuted get thrown out, if you will, or the defendant was actually, his sentence was vacated because an investigating agency, which had provided me with much evidence, decided they didn't need to give me all the evidence. And there was no way I would have known what that evidence was going back 5, 10, 12 years about a witness in the case. I'm just going to say it, I've seen some police lie in court about a traffic ticket, about the way a DWI arrest went on. And so I think to myself, if people, witnesses, police, whomever, are willing to take shortcuts or be dishonest about a case where the stakes are low, relatively, where the stakes are low, like a DWI or whatever, now what are they going to do when it counts, when it comes down to a case that's murder, it's going to end a life, and they think that guy is guilty and they swear to it, what shortcuts are they going to take? Is it going to be justice in their mind, or are they going to give the jury and the system all the tools and honesty that it needs so that mission is done properly?
And it is important for our society to trust our justice system.
It is.
And if that disintegrates, then basically the value of our Constitution disintegrates with it.
Absolutely does.
And most people don't realize, and I'm a believer in this, that the reason it was formed, both our federal and our state constitution, was to provide justice.
I think you're right. I mean, the highest duty I think any citizen can do, I think there's two. One, to vote and to decide who will be part of our government. And then the other one is serving on a jury. That's probably the only time I get angry in court.
Really?
I'll absolutely, and I have to bite my tongue, and I have to remember to be professional. But when I see somebody come up during jury selection and talk about the fact that it's going to be inconvenient to them, or they're going to lose some money, or they just don't want to be part of it, or they'll say things to deliberately get them thrown out. Like, I think everyone's guilty. or I think all police lie, or whatever they want to say. That is very difficult for me to swallow because I spend every day of my life trying to be part of the justice system. You spend a lot of time up in Concord trying to make sure that our government is accountable, in the justice system and the executive branch and the legislature and everything else. When I see people just push off that responsibility, I usually have to look at the judge looks at me, they know I'm getting all upset, and I just kind of take a breath. But I mean, people don't want to serve until it's their person on the line, or
Right.
somebody they love. Then they want jurors to come down from heaven.
How could you not care? Yeah.
Absolutely.
You witness a knife murder, the guy hands you the knife and runs off.
Yep. That's exactly right.
I need help.
Yeah, and I think our justice system reflects an adage that we hear a lot. I think Kennedy once said, "We get the leaders that we deserve." I heard a guy say, "We get the tax rate in America that we deserve." Well, you know what? You get the justice system you deserve too. And you're not going to have a good justice system if you're not willing to be a part of it. And everyone has a role to play.
Yeah. So your law firm's here in Nashua.
Yes, it is.
And it is called Shepherd and Osborne.
Yes.
And it's been, 12 years?
I've practiced for about 12 years, but we've been open for about 8 years.
8 years, here in Nashua.
Right here in Nashua.
Where's that
yes.
located?
It's at 351 Main Street, and I think we're right across from the Enterprise rental on Main Street.
South Main Street.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're right down that way, not too far from the nursing home. If you're going to Hayward's or whatever, swing in and say hi to us.
Yeah.
We're on the second floor. It's a small office. It's just myself, my law partner Justin, our assistant Krista, and more often than not, he brings his golden retriever Barkley. So I think more people come in just to see the dog than to see us, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, we're right there.
How long has he been practicing?
Justin has been practicing for about 3 more years than I have. He started off as a public defender, did some very good work, decided he wanted to see what life was like as a prosecutor, did some very good work, and then he and I just decided that it was time to pursue a whole new chapter. And I don't plan on changing anytime soon. I know he doesn't, so we really enjoy it.
Now, do you have a Facebook page at all? Or?
We have a website. I'm told we have a Facebook page, but I'm not the advertising guy.
Right.
I'm not really good at that stuff. I'll write the content and talk about what our case results are. But I know that people have reached out to us on Facebook, so I'm sure we have something up there.
Oh, well, look, if you could come back another time, or maybe even have your own show and maybe give out some legal advice that could help the community, that'd be wonderful.
Oh my gosh, I would be more than happy to do that.
Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Kevin, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. And if you need legal advice, contact a lawyer. Remember, you do have a right to remain silent. And until next week, thanks for watching Gate City Chronicles. We hope you enjoy the show. Thank you for watching Gate City Chronicles. And we want to thank our sponsor, Avard Cleaning. They've been a sponsor for quite a few years now, and we appreciate them being a sponsor. And if you want to be a guest on our show, contact accessnashua@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your story. Until next week, thanks for watching.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.